I have started the recording and the live stream, Madam President, so as soon as you're ready, we're good to go.
Okay, thank you. It's 6:31 and I see people are still joining, but I think we ought to go ahead and get started because I know we have a lot of ground to cover tonight. And I want to welcome everyone to our last meeting. Yay. It's been such a good experience, though. I hate to say that because it's been really nice to have this group together throughout the spring. And I think when we started, the end of May seemed so far off, but here we are. Tonight's meeting has not been posted as a board meeting, so a quorum of board members are not present. I did notice Mr. Guillory, and I would expect Mr. Davis will be here, but no other board members will be joining us tonight for that reason. So it's not because they're not interested, but it's because the meeting wasn't posted as a board meeting. So with that being said, I'm not too sure who I'm kicking it off to, if it's you, Mr. Sturzinger, or whether it's Dr. Kincannon.
I'm happy to jump in here at the beginning.
Okay.
And
yeah, let me just say thank you for joining, and also say that even though the meeting was not posted this evening, it is still being streamed for the public. So I want to thank all of you for joining, and we're going to get right to it because we have quite a bit of ground to cover this evening. Thank you.
we do have quite a bit of ground to cover, as you heard from Mr. Kell, Dr. Kincannon. We are planning for just a touch over an hour. Stick with us, and y'all have all been great about being, so no need to be there. And really been on two areas. First will be about the district financial capacity, which we'll hear from Dusty Traylor on that, and the second.
New schools for Carolina.
Then the second part would be on the facilities long-range master plan, and we want to get some engagement there on these final little details as we reach the end. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dusty. I saw that he is on the screen here, so we'll let him go with his presentation.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you this evening. Again, for the record, my name is Dusty Traylor. I'm a managing director with RBC Capital Markets. We have the honor and privilege of serving Waco ISD as financial advisor. And so I am going to walk us through a presentation tonight that discusses the district's bond capacity and the potential impact of various size bond programs on district tax rate as well as ratepayers. But before we get into that particular part of the presentation, I've got our presentation. We kind of start out with some of the basics. And I think it's always important before we get into a capacity study to talk a little bit in section 1 about the recent Texas school district bond election results. And then we'll get into the heart of the presentation. And in that heart of that presentation, we'll talk about the district's current outstanding bond program, the current outstanding bonds, as well as the district's tax base, and some of the assumptions that we've used in our analysis. So going into section 1 of the presentation, we talk specifically about recent Texas school district bond election results. And that will be found there on page 3 of the presentation. What we look at here is Texas school district bond elections dating back to May of 2016. Over that time frame, a total of 570 separate propositions have been brought to voters by Texas school districts, and of that, 413 of those propositions have successfully passed. We look at that on a par amount, or actually dollar amount of bonds that have been put forth to Texas voters. We're looking at a total of $57.46 billion, and of that amount, $48.279 billion have been successful. So if we look at the passage rate on a propositional basis, over 72% of all propositions have been successfully passed by Texas school districts. And if we look at it on a dollar amount passed, it's actually a little over 84% have been successful. We can look at even the May 2021 results just from a couple of weeks back. We saw just a little over $7 billion worth of bonds put forth to Texas voters, and those passed by the tune of 80% on a propositional basis, and then on a dollar amount basis, approximately 92% of the bonds put forth to Texas voters were successful. So the point of this is Texas school districts have historically been very successful in passing bond elections. And that starts with communicating the need for the facilities and having the community understand the need for those facilities. So I think we've had historically in Texas great results for bond elections. And then as we get into the next section is where we really kind of start to build the information around the district's bond capacity. And I think the best place to start with that is just looking at the district's current outstanding bond portfolio. Currently, the district, if you'll look at this slide here, the district has 5 series of bonds outstanding, totaling $141.44 million in principal amount outstanding. Those particular bonds, if you'll look at the graphs down below, those graphs down below depict the annual debt service payments on the outstanding bonds. The district's current annual debt service payments on its outstanding bonds is about $14 million per year. But what you'll notice if you look at that graph, the district's annual bond payments are expected to drop to just slightly over $10 million per year in fiscal year 2023. We have a significant $4 million drop, almost $4 million drop in district annual debt service requirements. And that coincides very well with consideration for a potential November 21 bond election. If the district were to be put forth a November 21 bond election, we would sell those bonds sometime in the spring or winter of 2022. In terms of budgeting for next payments, actual debt service payments on that bond, that would start in the fiscal 2023 fiscal year, which you can see there. We have that great drop and a tremendous amount of capacity built in right there from that. So that's the district's outstanding bond portfolio. You can see that those payments stay fairly level through the end of the term of the current outstanding bonds, which is, I believe, in 2038. And then on the next slide, I think it's also important to make the community aware of the tax rates that are present in some of our neighboring districts. And so the graph that you see below, or the graph that you see there, we provided the tax rates for Midway ISD, Belton ISD, Temple ISD, China Spring, Robinson, La Vega, and then of course Waco ISD. What you can really see from this is Waco ISD's total tax rate is down towards the bottom of this peer group of districts in the area. And that's even, I think, what's more important to point out is that some of these districts on this graph have either recently held a bond election or are potentially considering bond elections in the near term. So for instance, I know China Spring ISD had a May 2021 bond election. As part of their bond election, they were anticipating an INS tax rate increase of between 10 and 12 cents. So their tax rate ought to be going up here soon as well. So again, your tax rate at Waco ISD is very much in line with your peer districts around you. One thing that maybe I ought to point out to the committee, we broke this chart down into 2 different segments of the column. The M&O portion is that portion in dark blue. M&O stands for maintenance and operations tax. That is the portion of the tax rate that is dedicated solely for operational purposes of the district. That does not include the purposes of repayment of debt. The other portion there in gray is the INS tax rate portion. INS stands for interest and sinking fund tax rate. And that is the portion of the tax rate that is specifically dedicated to the repayment of bonded debt service. So I wanted to make sure everybody on here understood that breakdown of those 2 components of the tax rate. So if you'll turn with me to the next slide, we just provide some highlights of Waco ISD refinancing. Going back to 2013, the district has refinanced approximately $269.9 million of outstanding bonds. That has resulted in debt service savings or interest cost reduction of approximately $41.166 million over the life of those bonds. I point this out just to communicate to the committee. Waco ISD is a great steward of its bonded indebtedness. And so when the district has previously gone out to borrow funds through a bond issue, the district has always sought opportunities with those bonds to refinance them to lower interest rates. This is very akin to if you or I were to have a mortgage on a home outstanding at a higher rate, and we seek an opportunity if rates fall to refinance that home mortgage to a lower interest rate and thus a lower payment. That is what Waco ISD has done many times. Whenever those opportunities have presented itself, the district has done a very good job of taking advantage of what the markets offered to reduce that debt service burden on district taxpayers. The next slide that we have here, we get into a look as part of our bond capacity. We always need to take a look at what is the district's taxable assessed valuation, or another word for that is tax base. So the graph and table that you see here, we provide a historical view of the district's tax base going back to the 2012 fiscal year, so 10 years worth of tax base analysis. In the current tax year, Waco ISD has a tax base of $6.9 billion. And if we look back over the course of the past 10 years, that tax base has grown at a rate of approximately, if we look at it on a 5-year growth rate basis, the tax base has grown at about 6.5% per year. And if we look at it on a 10-year average, that tax base growth has been about 5.8%. So the district has experienced some growth in tax base. We bring that into play later on in the analysis that we do to determine the district's bond capacity. Additionally, as part of this page, we also look at the historical tax rates of Waco ISD. Currently, the total tax rate for Waco ISD is 1.264, comprised of the total of the M&O and the INS. But what you'll see if you look at this graph is the district's tax rate over the course of the past several years has actually been as high as a 1.41. So the district tax rate is a good almost 15 cents lower than its historical high over that time. Now, some of that is a result of compression on the M&O or maintenance and operating side, but the district has also reduced its INS tax rate during that time as well. So we talked a little bit about outstanding bond portfolio of the district. We talked about the district's tax base and tax rate history. And now we get into the summary of assumptions that we use in terms of driving our capacity analysis and rate impact. So our analysis assumes that the district conducts a bond election in November of 2021. It assumes that any rate impact is an impact over the current INS tax rate of the 22.4 cents per $100 valuation. We also assume regarding tax base that the district's tax base is $6.47 billion. Now we have to, when we're doing this, we have to back out those values that are frozen. And the district had some portion of tax base that's frozen. So there's 6.47 of non-frozen tax base. Then we assume that the tax base actually remains flat next year, that there is no growth in the tax base of the district for the 2021-22 fiscal year. That is a result of a little bit of the COVID environment that we're coming out of, and some discussions and information we've received from the appraisal district. The district's received its preliminary values for next fiscal year, and those values indicate maybe very modest growth, but there is some thought that those values next year might end up flat to where we are this year. So we're going to hold them flat for next year. However, we are assuming 5% growth in the 2 years following that. So we're going to build in 5% additional value there. And then we also know that the district receives or collects about $900,000 in its INS budget from values of taxable properties or properties that are subject to the freeze. So we didn't include that value in the 6.4 billion, but we do collect taxes there, and they collect about 900,000 on the INS side. So that's part of our analysis. Additionally, we assumed a tax collection rate of about 98%. The district always does a very nice job of collecting its levy. And so for our analysis purposes, we assumed 98% collection rate. And then we also have to make some assumption regarding interest rates when we are selling bonds. For the scenarios that we ran, we assumed that any bonds that we would be selling, we would use a rate of approximately 115 basis points over current market rates. 115 basis points is 1.15% over current market rates. If we were to be in the market today, we would think we would have interest rates somewhere in the 2.25% to 2.5% interest rate range. So you can see there, we're adding a little bit to that rate. And the reason for that is in order to be somewhat conservative. It is, we're talking about a potential November election here. And we will not be selling those bonds if we have a November election until sometime after the first of the year. And there is the possibility that interest rates rise. We are in a very nice interest rate environment currently, some of the most historically low interest rates we've ever seen in the bond market. However, those rates have ticked up just a little bit since the first of the year. So again, we wanted to build some level of conservatism into the interest rate estimate that we have there. And so in terms of our capacity, we ran a total of 5 analyses here. The first analysis was just taking a look at what is the district's bonding capacity, assuming no increase in the INS tax rate. And with that, the district could go out and borrow approximately $152.775 million without a need to increase the INS tax rate. Then the next scenario that we ran was $250 million. That assumed a 4.97 cent increase in the INS tax rate. Our next scenario is $300 million. $300 million increase was approximately 7.85 cents. Our next scenario was $350 million. That results in an INS tax rate of approximately 11.33 cents. And then the final scenario that we've run thus far, scenario 5, is $375 million. That results in an INS tax rate of just under 12.5 cents, 12.49 cent increase to the INS rate. Now, I think it's always important, we can talk about the cents and things like that, but I think it's always important to take that and get to what does that really cost a homeowner in terms of what's it going to take out of their pocket. And so the portion of the analysis where we did that is we assumed the average taxable value for a homeowner in Waco ISD, the average value in the district is approximately $117,499. Now I want to point out that is for that's the taxable value. So that reduces your market value by approximately $25,000 when you account for the homestead exemption. Okay, so the average market value for a home in Waco ISD is somewhere between $140,000 and $145,000 based on the information that we have. So then we applied that and looked at what the impacts of these scenarios would be both annually and monthly to that homeowner. And I think for purposes of this discussion, I might just jump right to the monthly impact. And the reason for doing that is I think most folks look at their budgets on a monthly basis. What am I paying per month? And so the graph at the bottom right of the page looks at how these bond scenarios would impact homeowners monthly. Obviously, the 152.725 million scenario one, there's no impact. The 250 million is just under $5 per month. The $300 million scenario is right at $7.69 per month. The $350 million is $11, just under $11.10 per month. And then the $375 million scenario 5 is $12.23 per month. I think it's always good to take those sorts of numbers and put them down into, you know, real world examples. And I would just say for all of these scenarios, 1 through 5, we get to the max there at number 5, $375 million. That really works out to a cost of, you know, less than a takeout pizza per month is what the actual cost to a homeowner might be there. So I think it's always good to condense that down into real world spending. Then the pages that follow in the analyses, I don't really want to spend a tremendous amount of time on these. This is the actual spreadsheet that drives the analysis that we prepared and then we summarized previously. So you'll look there, the various column headers that we have there. Column number 2 is our assumption regarding the tax-based taxable assessed valuation. Column 3 there is our existing annual debt service requirements. Columns 4 and 5 are the assumed issuance debt service on the bonds. These particular analysis, we assumed that a portion of these bonds would be sold in 22, another portion sold in 23. I think for each of these scenarios, we assumed approximately 2/3 of a bond program issued in 22, the remaining third issued in 2023. Column 6 being that frozen value that we talked about. Then we get over here into columns 7 and 8, some other revenues accounted for in the INS budget. And then column 9, the estimated total net debt service paid from INS taxes. Then column 12 being our projected INS tax rate in total, once you take into account the debt service from existing and the new bond programs. And then column 11 just is the summary of the estimated increase in INS tax rate. And so there's 5 of these spreadsheets, one for each and every scenario. I don't really feel the need to go through each of those, but that's the format that you would be able to see for each of those. I know I've said a lot and spoken a lot about a bunch of numbers. I don't know if this is a time in the presentation and for your meeting for you to pose questions to me, or if you guys wanted to move on to the next portion of your meeting this evening.
Dusty, there are a couple of questions here in the chat, including frozen values. Are those only allowed for individuals 65 and older?
Frozen values are for individuals 65 and over, and for the homestead of those folks.
Great. And then another question, I believe it was in regards to the home values we saw, or the estimated monthly impact on slide 17. And the question was, is that based on the home appraised at $117,000?
That is not based on a home appraised at $117,000. That is based upon a home appraised at $117,000 plus $25,000. So in about the $142,000 range.
Great. And that was because the homestead would reduce that appraised value.
That is exactly. That's because of the $25,000 homestead exemption.
Great. And then do the scenarios assume that callable bonds are called?
The scenarios do not assume that callable bonds are called. I do think that is a good distinction. And we're just trying to be as accurate as we can here. Like we talked about previously, the district has done a nice job of refinancing bonds when they have a call feature. We would expect that trend to continue. We would also look at, we assumed that the tax base would have some level of growth for a couple of years, but then we stopped that growth in our analysis. We don't expect the tax base of Waco ISD to stop growing. And so it could be in the next few years, as the tax base continues to grow, we could utilize that to call bonds when we get to the call date. That absolutely could happen.
Great. I appreciate that, Dusty. And I think as others have any questions, if you want to add them into the chat, we'll go ahead and jump back into the presentation and appreciate your time. And definitely that information is going to come in handy as we move through and ask some questions of the group. But I always think of it as being pre-qualified for a mortgage kind of idea. So.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to think about it.
All right, Jessica, if you want to bring us back up here and as we move forward, want to kind of bring us back to the long-term vision about thinking about the Waco Facilities Master Plan and the work that we've done to date of starting with the facility condition assessment, educational suitability, and demographics, but really working off the highest hope and input from this group that really is the heart of this master plan as we move forward. As we've looked through various lenses for consideration here, as we presented project, really got feedback from the community committee to really understand the choices that are being made and the opportunities moving forward. And really that represents on 3 levels of projects, or 3 key projects as we talked about it. And the first of which is at the high school level, focusing in on the replacement of Waco High School campus. Here, we really saw that there was an opportunity for students and for a delivery of education to really enhance that learning environment and really weighed that information about the opportunity cost between maintaining and renovating the existing facility to constructing a new facility. So you remember this graphic here that we saw, but ideally that it represents a 370,000 square foot new facility is supporting the full 9th through 12th grade. And right now we're estimating that would sit at about $156 million. And so this was one of those project priorities out of the options presented. As we switch to the middle school level, we were again continued the discussion about the ideal educational facilities as well as right sizing for the middle school population. So here we identified 2 main efforts. One is a new school at Carver that would consolidate Carver and Indian Spring. And then as well, a new school, replacement school for Tennyson Middle School. Here, the committee really provided feedback about the importance of geographic boundaries and location with the city, making sure that we're supporting all areas of Waco ISD. And here, then you'll see the two potential projects would be about $154 million for the 2 middle school campuses. And lastly, we also focused in on the elementary school facilities. Here, there's a large need across the 15 campuses that were identified and ultimately really worked within the groupings of the campuses from the minor to moderate and moderate to significant need, identified that long-term vision, and it addressed the immediate priority, which is a replacement elementary school at Kendrick Elementary School, South Waco with additions and renovations, and then moving the students from Alta Vista to the 2 adjacent schools. Here, these projects, we look at a total project cost of $66 million moving forward. And so as we look and we start talking about wrapping up the facility master plan process, we will work to summarize this entire effort and present it to the Board of Trustees. So here you see just a representation of a facility master plan document that pulls all the information that we've hit over these last 8 meetings into a single document that we'll look to present to the Board of Trustees in June. as we wrap up this process. And so this last key step here is really to get a lot of your input and be able to support to finesse those last details here. And so the first one that we're going to have your support on is an effort in ranking those project priorities, which is starting to get a taste of where the rubber hits the road, I'll say, where you want to think about, if we have to choose between these 4 projects, which are the top priority and which are the lowest priorities. And so if you will grab your phone, this is going to be a little bit different activity than before, but if you will turn on your camera, and for those of you who have attended a restaurant, you may have seen this before, but you point the camera at the QR code, which is the little black and white squiggly image on the screen, and it will open up a link at the top of your camera. Alternatively, you'll see a link down there at the bottom for forms.office.com. You can type in that, and capital and not capital letters are important within that. And then you can input your ranking here. And you'll do that. You'll see a screen pop up, be able to input it, and you'll just click and drag the little boxes. There'll be a box for each one of these 4 groupings of projects, and then be able to submit that. Yes, we can put the link in the chat. Oh, thank you, Josh.
Sure thing.
He's a quicker draw of the West than I was ready for. So we'll give everybody a few minutes. We already have 31 responses, 32 responses.
We have some quick texters, huh?
Right. Get to just a couple more responses. We'll switch it over here. Let's see. Jessica, that's coming your way. So right now we've had 50 responses, and Jessica will be pulling up the results here in just a second, but just kind of hitting the highlights, and you'll see these graphically here. So out of the 50 participants so far, 82% of you said that Waco High School was your #1 priority for the effort. And let's see, number 2, let's see, Carver Middle School in Indian Spring is 46% said it was your second choice, and a very close third choice for 38% for Carver and Indian Spring, excuse me. And then Tennyson was 32% for the second choice and 26% for the third choice, but it was a 38% on the fourth choice there. And then finally, Alta Vista was 32% for the third choice and 48% for the fourth choice. So you see that graphically here as you see it on the screen. So the dark orange represents the first choice, all the way to the dark blue represents the fourth choice. So generally speaking, they're in order of Waco High School, Carver and Indian Spring, then Tennyson, then Alta Vista. I'd say the Tennyson and Alta Vista combination there are pretty close tie there at the end. So definitely some of the challenge, but definitely gives us some of the great input here as we move forward within the design or within the facility master plan process. So as we move forward here, and as we think again back to the facility master plan, we think about those guiding principles moving forward. We're going to continue thinking about the priorities of those projects, which you helped elicited. And then as we move forward, we've talked a little bit about the priorities of the project, but when we think about that broad term vision guided by these principles, and on the next slide, we think about the projects as they look out over time. We had identified those immediate priorities, which are the 4 projects that you just ranked. And then we had also talked about the long-term projects, about how we continue moving forward throughout the district. And for those of you who had your calculators out, or maybe Rusty was calculating in his head instantaneously, those 3 groupings of projects for the elementary, middle school, and high school level total to $376 million of effort from a total project cost. And so as we move forward, we would want to now then balance as well. Okay, let's bring that together. And so we think about the priority of those projects. We think about the bonding capacity. We think about the need within Waco ISD. So this poll, we're going to ask everybody to participate again. And Jessica, if you'll make sure this is active. Yep, perfect. And then you'll be texting on this one. And what we're asking here is, what level of bond funding do you think the Board of Trustees should seek approval for? And so what you'll see at the bottom is A through E are the 5 scenarios that Dusty had presented. So the 152 million to the 375 million. And then right below those lines, you'll see the rate adjustment. And then as well, the very lowest line is the monthly increase. So from the $0 on the left to a $12.23 increase on the far right. Got a 3-way tie early on. So last time we had 50 responses. So we're we're about 40% there of matching up responses. And this information is really important as we move forward, because it definitely gives the Board of Trustees and the district information to be able to help the decisions in moving forward about the priority of the projects, the level of support about the community, and ultimately, the decision to call a bond and where it should land. So we'll give it one more second here so that everybody gets the opportunity to vote. This poll will remain active for a little bit thereafter. So if you don't get the moment this exact second, definitely by the end of the meeting, please do so. And as of right now, 21 of the 38 votes would support $375 million with another what is that, 15 over 40, 3/8, so 37% supporting 300 or $350 million. So I think, Amy, when you are ready, I think we can start wrapping up the last little step here of the master plan. You're on mute.
Great. Thank you, Jared. Okay. So the next piece that we want to talk about, now that we've gathered some other information from you all, is kind of the final step of this process and this effort. And on behalf of the committee, we've put together a recommendation for your review that Jared would present to the Board of Trustees as a culmination of the efforts of this collective group. And I'll read the recommendation. And then what we'd really love to see is, a thumbs up if the group is approving of this recommendation, to kind of represent your thoughts at this point in the effort. So the recommendation would read, over the past 5 months, Waco ISD's Community Advisory Committee has carefully studied the district's facility conditions, educational vision, demographics, and financial capacity. Through this process, we have concluded that facility improvements are needed to support our shared vision for academic excellence, work toward equity, and efforts to maintain and protect the community's investment. The facility's long-range master plan creates a long-term vision, and we understand that the district will need to balance potential projects, ongoing needs within the district, and financial capacity while implementing it. Additionally, we know that it may require multiple bond elections to fund the entire 10 to 15-year plan. With that in mind, the Community Advisory Committee recommends that the Board of Trustees consider calling for a bond election as soon as November 2021 to fund a first phase of facility needs at a cost of approximately $325 million to $375 million. We recommend the board carefully consider bond proposition packaging to support the long-term educational vision, good stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and improvements for students at all grade levels. So this recommendation really serves to help, inform the board and the public of the process that has been gone through over the last 5 months, and really to give the group an opportunity to kind of talk about the experience very briefly, and let the board know that you've come to this conclusion. And additionally, the district would love to see you all in the audience at the June 10th board meeting to show your support for the recommendation, but most importantly, to thank you all personally and publicly for your service on this committee. So I was reading, I didn't get to see, maybe we can go to gallery view and see if we've got thumbs up. Do we have everybody feeling good about oh, I love it. I've got real thumbs and I've got virtual thumbs and we've got icon thumbs. Great. All right, that is looking good. So the key date is June 10th, and that would be the date that the facilities master plan would be presented to the board and that the recommendation would be read. Jared, do you have any other comments on this process at this point, or anything else about that meeting presentation?
No, I think you hit it all. We'd welcome to see everybody there. It's always great to have support of the community with the board, and I appreciate everybody's effort, but we're not done yet, of course. And that's it.
Okay, and to confirm, the meeting is June 10th. That's what I saw on, okay, it's June 10th, and the time. So maybe we can put the time in the chat, Josh, and
Yes.
let everyone know. That would be great.
Usually starts at 6 p.m. on the 10th, but a lot of times they go into executive session. So make sure to check the agenda.
Okay, and you all have been an outstanding advisory committee, and it has been such a pleasure to work with you. So I'm looking forward to that meeting as well. So I think we can go to the next step in the process tonight's meeting. And really the next thing we want to do is have an opportunity to break out again. We've been so appreciative of all the listening and the learning and the great consideration and questions asked of the information that you have all received over the past 5 months. We wanted the opportunity to share in a big group, but we also wanted to be sure everyone had a chance to be heard. So we're breaking into just 2 groups tonight for you to interact with a larger group. So this is how it's going to work, and this is the question. We want you to think about the Waco Long Range Facilities Master Plan and a potential November or May bond election. And share what outcomes are you most excited about for the students, staff, and community of Waco ISD that will be coming out of this effort. There are facility master plan elements you might want to keep in mind, and they're listed on this slide. We can also put them in the chat of the break room or the breakout room to remember in case you want to point out one of those items related to demographics or facility assessments or this educational suitability. There's a number of things there to think about. So we're going to automatically be split into 2 groups in a minute, and Jared's going to moderate one of the groups and I'll moderate the other. We want to hear from you. We have 20 minutes in our groups, and Jared and I are going to be working, to really have as many voices heard as possible. So after we all have a chance to kind of share what we're most excited about, we'll be brought back together as a big group here in this room, and we'll summarize your feedback and thoughts, but also we'll encourage you at that time to maybe put your comments and group highlights in the big group chat when we come back to the full group. So I think with that, we're ready to break out into those rooms.
Okay.
So I think we moved group 2 from the group 2 room to the main room, and we're waiting on group number 1. All right. Well, I think everybody's back. We have 60 participants back in the room, and was really excited by the discussion that went on in our room. And I think out of anything, there were people who brought up some of the key points from the very beginning of the meeting or of the CAC process when we talked about pride, equity, and about creating, I'll call it competition with surrounding districts. But ultimately, they felt that this plan and this opportunity really reinforced those original goals that were identified and move it forward. So as the group talked a little bit more in detail about the individual projects and plans, there was an opportunity to discuss the integrity of the learning environment and improving that educational opportunity, not only for students, but also teachers. That this really became a beacon of hope for the community, of really helping grow to the opportunities. And then as well, that this is not only just about the buildings, but it's about the students, the community, putting those into effect, and very simply stated of putting the money and effort all in one place to be able to support the bond program. We did have somebody, I think, who made a motion to call a bond and go vote on it in about the next week on June 10th. So they were ready to go out to the voters. So that was exciting to hear. And ultimately, we landed on the conversation, and we'll talk a little bit more about it here as the district, as this moves forward. If the district calls a bond, how it moves from into a fact communication plan, but advocates would potentially come from this group in the development of a PAC. So future steps there that could take place outside of the district. So it was really great things to hear within our group in support of the process and the outcomes, and everybody was looking forward to the future. And I think there were definitely some emotions that started to come forth about what this means for Waco and the city of Waco and Waco ISD. All right, Amy, you want to?
Thanks, Jared. We had a great group as well, very, very thoughtful and very, very interested in the process and what could happen for the future of Waco ISD. Some of the comments that were shared were a lot of excitement about students being part of new facilities that they're seeing around the city and in the community. Talking about some of the new buildings going up that are more commercial buildings, and how exciting it is for the students in the school district to participate in that growth and prosperity of the community. Really looking for an environment to, someone said, pull potential out of these students and create that sense of pride for the community, the neighborhood, and the schools as a number way to honor our teachers. Some people talked about catching up and having facilities across the district that were more equitable from a facility standpoint. So they were excited about the opportunity to improve some of the older facilities that have not been improved in a while other than maintenance. There were some comments about really being happy that the district has a leadership team who have come together and realized the needs of the community, the kids, the parents, and the teachers, and that the district is not just talking about it, that they're doing it and taking action. We did have a couple members in the group who expressed, some concern that the district continue to focus on academic initiatives and teaching and learning, to be sure that the district is looking at what will truly improve student success, and that is not only facilities, and talking about competition from other schools in the region. Angela did share some information with the group that the district is receiving some significant federal funds from COVID stimulus money that will be focused on academic teaching and learning as well. We also had a couple of alumni in our group, as well as those who didn't attend schools but have children in the schools. And they were excited to see how a bond package would allow the district to catch up to the 21st century in facilities. That was something that someone said, and really make sure that people who live in the city are willing to invest in our children. Seeing the older schools get a facelift and have that pride be restored. And I think we had somebody talk about really being excited about, as the old saying goes, if you build it, they will come. Not only having a positive impact on students and learning, but also on recruiting and maintaining the strong teachers, principals, and staff that the district has. So lots of positive and thoughtful comments, as well as the request that, hey, let's keep our eye on the ball from an academic standpoint too, as we enhance our facilities in Waco ISD for the better of all who benefit from that.
And I would ask, as those a couple have shared their comments in the chat, feel free to add more as we're going there. And Jessica's comment there reminded me of something that was said in our group about the inertia that Dr. Cannon has made in the district, of not only in the facilities in this process, but in the educational side as well. So I'm sure that message and that banner will be carried quite far here as we move forward. But this does give us an opportunity to wrap up the process, and I kind of touch base on next steps, but I'm going to ask Jessica to bring back up the presentation. I believe Dr. Cannon here is going to close us out on the next steps.
Let me unmute there. Thank you for all of your comments this evening. I appreciate it very much. I want to take the opportunity to invite you to either come or listen to Thursday night's board meeting. We've been working on academics heavily since I got here. That's been a focus. And on Thursday evening, I'll be presenting a public hearing on the use of our stimulus funds. And so I'd love for this committee to hear that, because while this committee's working on facilities, we're also actively working on instruction in Waco ISD. So we're really trying to work at improving from all angles. And so I appreciate that conversation very much, because that's where my heart is curriculum and instruction. As far as this process goes, we would need to call a bond election in August, or the board would need to take action in August for that to be on a November ballot. So it is the board's decision going forward if they would like to have a November or a May bond election, and which program they would like to carry forward. So Jared will be presenting to the board on June the 10th. And however, the board will also have an opportunity to discuss the long-range facilities planning process this Thursday evening as well. So a lot of pieces to make this happen. We're still waiting on those final certified values. Those pennies that Dusty talked about in the financial report could change. This is all preliminary, but I think we have really good, clear direction from this committee. And we certainly have enough for the board to consider as they make their decisions. Finally, I would mention that the Waco High School design process is moving. We've begun to vision about a new Waco High School, and we have started our user groups. So today our architects were meeting with teacher groups, core content areas, and special education today, really gathering input from all of the users about the needs for our students and our classroom spaces, and we'll be looking at extracurricular spaces as well. So that's happening because of a resolution that the board approved to reimburse the district for those planning purposes, so that as soon as possible after a bond election passes, then the district could move forward with taking care of Waco High School. So we've only started some preliminary work on Waco High School, because we know that high schools take a long time to not only design, but also to build, or to rebuild in this case. And so a lot happening in Waco ISD. We just really want to appreciate you all for your commitment. Most of you have been here for all 8 meetings. That's really significant, especially given that we did this during a pandemic. and by Zoom, which I've never done before, which has been really tremendous. So I appreciate you very much. Thank you. I'm going to let our board president wrap it up with any other information she'd like to add, and I'll say good night to you all.
Okay, thank you. Well, I first of all was those of you that were in the group with Coach Love, his words really resonated with me, and especially the doing part. That we're seeing action about things that, as long as I've been involved in the district and a parent and on the board, I've never felt this level of energy and excitement about the future. And part of that is your participation, your willingness to spend this time with us when we called you last November and December. Thank you for telling us yes. This work's it's really unprecedented in the district, at least in my time, which over the last 25 years, we've never had this comprehensive a view at our facilities, and really a hopeful and positive outlook on that we can move this district forward so that we can compete. We can offer our kids the best. We can recruit the best and retain the best. And in the end, we're all about student outcomes. We're all about enabling our students to be successful, and the opportunity to catch up and to be a part of it is really exciting and heartwarming. So I'm so appreciative for all of you. And then finally, I just want to say that this work's really important, and you have seen how complicated it is and how many moving parts there are. We've heard from many experts, and we've heard from all of you throughout the process. And I think, just so you know, this board is committed to the success of our students. We're committed to improving student outcomes, and probably, I don't know what Dr. Kincannon would say, but I feel like, as being a member of the board and in conversations and in meetings with their administration and staff, the energy that you've seen pour into the facilities plan, and you could double it or maybe triple when it comes to curriculum and instruction and student performance. And fortunately, I guess a silver lining is the federal stimulus money. And if you are really interested and want to get more excited about CNI and what's going to be going on in that side of the house, please tune in to Dr. Kincannon's presentation of her plan for that money and the work that's already going. There was a lot of work going on without the federal stimulus money, a lot of really good work. So please continue to stay engaged and ask questions, provide us feedback, and watch as the summer progresses and we see what the board decides to do. So with all that, I appreciate everyone. Continue to drop your comments in the chat. And with that, I think we are adjourned. Good night.
Lorraine, I saw your question. It's on Thursday evening. The meeting starts